It makes sense to me why men in the military are usually abusive, because their daddy, the government, abuses them. Like, to me, it makes perfect sense in terms of like the cycle of violence. Now, I say this as the daughter of a Vietnam vet and some pretty bad experiences with military men. For starters, most men who go into the military come from broken homes, like my own father. Unbelievably abusive home, terrifying environment to be in. He didn't even want to join the military. He did it because it was during the Vietnam War and he didn't want to get drafted, which means he'd be put into combat on the front line. Instead, he went into the Navy, he volunteered and became like an officer or whatever, that he would be a paper pusher so he wouldn't die. I actually think is a really smart move. Instead of like dodging the draft, he just kind of outsmarted it somehow. He also had the privilege to do that because he was a white man with a college degree. He saw what was happening to all of his friends getting drafted and sent over there. But from what I understand from his friends that I met after he died, that like all of his high school friends who were actually like surprisingly like healthy men. My dad actually was very progressive for the time he grew up in and the environment he grew up in. This is the South, a white man in the South. Apparently he was out there like marching and fighting for civil rights and stuff, which is shocking knowing his parents and what I've learned about his parents, my grandparents, since they died. That's another TikTok. But I'm actually pretty proud of him for fighting against something that he was indoctrinated into. But apparently he was a different man when he came back from Vietnam. Instead of ever getting like real help, like therapy, and to deal with his childhood trauma and then the trauma of war, he just took meds. He took so many meds he peed blue. He was in the psych ward a couple times. The man had so many mental health issues, and then going into the military made them worse, and then coming out of the military, he didn't have the support he needed. I don't care what they say they're providing, they are not properly treating men in the military, anyone in the military, regardless of gender. So guess who was on the front line of his internal war? The women in his life, and especially the children in his life. The trauma that he did to me and my sister, I mean, I'm 45 and I'm still undoing it. So while I have an enormous amount of empathy and even sympathy for my dad, I still hold him responsible for refusing to actually do any work and instead just drinking every single day until the day he died, taking meds instead of getting real help, because those meds did not actually help him. I also understand it was a different time, and a lot of the resources that are available to me were not available to him. I understand all that. But I will say that he was in Veterans for Peace for the last like 20 years of his life. He absolutely hated war, and he believes like the military is evil. Also was like proud of what he sacrificed at the same time. So like this weird position that they're put in, carry out the abuse of the government and being thought of as heroes but treated like crap. Like that weird double life that they live is already a minefield. And then I've also worked with like writers. One of the writers that I've worked with who was trying to write a book, she was a military wife, and holy crap, the abuse that she endured in the home because of the way that the military, and I'm speaking specifically of the U.S. military, which is like the, evil empire, right? Like, we are the bad people. We are the bad people. Anything that the U.S. government and the military backs, I just assume is like the wrong side of anything. Because I have a history degree. That's the thing I came out of history with, is learning that we are the bad people. Like, not individually, but our military represents like evil. It's self-interest, always about oil or some money and power. But all these military guys get treated like crap. They are basically like married to the military. The stuff that they endure when their boss being such an abusive boss, they are literally at the beck and call of their entire lives. They are owned by the military. So then their families are owned because of the way they're trained in terms of like domination and ranking and all this crap. And then not being able to talk about feelings or literally anything. Having to be so tough. I mean, it's like the most toxically, hello. Hi. He's like, stop talking about this. The most like toxically masculine environment, which is funny because I worked in the film industry for a long time and everyone would be like, this is like the military, but like with like leftist kind of people. It's the same mentality. You endure and you endure and you endure. Because that's how you get up in the rank. And then when you finally make it, you crap on everyone below you because you went through that. Just like, toughen people up. People used to being abused. And so they take that mentality of like them having like a big dominant boss. They come home and they take that out. It's like their daddy is the boss, but they want to be the boss too. So then the abuse the abuse of those kids and the wives in the military. Not all military men. I mean, I would be willing to bet it's worse than what the statistics of domestic violence with cops is. But one of the times I almost got shot was when I tried to go camping, and I pulled up into a camping spot late at night in Colorado. And it's totally normal to go into like the forest, pull over and sleep. You're allowed to do that. And, you know, the national forest all over the U.S., you're allowed to stay anywhere for free for 2 weeks, as long as it's in like logging road, whatever. I know the rules very well because I worked in the outdoor industry, and there was like no camping spots left anywhere. And me and my abusive ex at the time, this is before I realized he was abusive, pulled into this campsite because we couldn't find any, and there was like extra space. So we tried to pull in at night and just start setting up. And we hear this voice in the dark, and this man is like, "What are you doing here?" And I look down, and there is a red dot on me, on my chest. We're like, "Sorry, we're just trying to camp, and there's nowhere to camp. We literally just want to sleep, but there's nowhere else to go." And this dude was like pointing the red laser kept going from me to my ex. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get shot right now by a man with like a terrifying pew pew. Anyway, we finally talked him down, and then he was like, let us join. We drank beers with him. I didn't drink because I don't drink. He was there with his children and his wife, and he had like 3 enormous pew-pews with him. He showed us pictures of his wall at home that was covered in pew-pews. He had the man was a family man, and his wife was like pretty cool. He had these kids, and we were playing with the kids. But I'm just like, I cannot imagine living with someone who had that many weapons in the home and was that paranoid. Literally, he told us he sleeps holding his gun. I mean, can you imagine pulling up to a campground and someone like having a laser? No, like I've had so many experiences with military men, and none of them have been positive. They're terrifying. And the military knows this. They recruit men from broken homes. They recruit men from poverty. They recruit men who have no other choice. They recruit men who need some sort of father figure. And what they end up getting is like an abusive daddy boss who puts them in the worst environment among other lost men. And then they commit atrocious crimes together. I mean, one of the things I learned when I moved to France, this is in the Netflix documentary, that as soon as like the Americans liberated France or whatever, the men were raping the women over here. That's just common knowledge. Can you imagine what kind of mentality you have if you go over and you give your life to like liberate people and then grape half of them? But that's the mentality of the military. That's like, the military is like a microcosm of everything wrong with this whole system of white supremacy culture, patriarchy, capitalism, like just the dehumanization of us. And it all hinges on violence and domination and power. And these men who are like this foot soldiers of it are treated the worst, and then therefore inflict that same pain on all the people who love them most and count on them most and are trapped in a home with them. Every time I do videos about like abusive men, my comments are full of military wives. And especially if you go overseas, you are stuck. You are stuck with these men. You're financially dependent on them. And you can't work usually because your credentials don't transfer to another country. One of the women I worked with was German, and she was a therapist with a master's degree, married to an American military man, and then came over here to the US and was cleaning toilets because she couldn't do her job here. This is again why I tell y'all, do not move to another country for a man, especially a military man. But honestly, I wouldn't date military men in general unless they are like actively healing their trauma, because if they're in the military, they've got a lot of it. And then in addition to that, and I've talked about this in other videos, if you sleep next to one of these men with all that PTSD, these men might like unalive you in their sleep by accident. My husband is a very gentle man. I'm the one full of trauma. I have actually like accidentally smacked him in my sleep because I'm fighting off men who've raped me in my dreams, and I'm like, whack. If I am a woman who has like hardly any muscle compared to this man, and I never actually hurt him, it's like an ongoing joke that sleeping next to me with all of this PTSD is like not a fun experience for him. Imagine being a woman next to a man that outweighs you by like 50 to 100 pounds with all that trauma that he's not treating. It's life and death, y'all. These heroes are traumatized, exploited, full of rage, and nowhere to go with it. So to me, it makes perfect sense that they take it out on their families. And I say this as a survivor of one of these men, one of these unhealed men who is sacrificed by patriarchy and capitalism and white supremacy culture. And yet men think I hate men.